All right. Well, I will let me welcome everybody to the April meeting of the Glendale Planning Historic Preservation Commission, even though it's March 29th. Beth, did you have something you wanted to say before we begin?
Well, I just got an email from Angie Larimer, who asked if I could send her the link to the meeting, and I suggested she go to the Glendale website. I'm not sure that she wishes to speak or not, or just watch.
Well,
Is there
if you send her,
anything
I know you can't send your link because that's special to you alone.
Right. So I told her to go to the village website.
Would that work, David? Is the link on the website?
Well, you can watch it.
Does you don't know if she wants to participate?
I don't know.
All right.
David,
Beth, are you
hear the question?
Oh, David's dropped off.
I think he froze up. He's rebooting. Give him a second.
Everybody froze on me. There we are.
Did you hear any of that, David?
Just welcome to the April meeting of and then everyone stopped.
All right. In short, Beth received an email from one of our neighbors who wants to perhaps watch and perhaps even participate. And we don't have a link to send to her. Number one, can she go to the village's website for a link? And number two, if not, can we send you her email, the neighbor's email, and then you could send her an email with a link? Are either of those possible?
I believe he's having Wi-Fi problems.
Wally, do you know the answer to those questions?
I don't. I know he had a cutoff to bundle it all up today around 3:30. Not sure if he can do that now, though, after the fact.
Okay, well, she can watch via the village website.
Okay.
Actually, if she goes to Zoom and types in ICRC-TV, it'll be prominent and she can watch it live.
Okay.
YouTube.
All right. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'm having all kinds of issues. To answer the first question, when I'm still with us, no, she cannot go to YouTube just to join the meeting. Is there an email address perhaps that somebody could chat to me and I might be able to get her in? Or him, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's to her. Beth, can you send that to David while we're talking?
Yes.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, let's continue. We do have a short agenda by number of issues, but I suspect it will take up the full hour and a half of time. So let's try to be judicious with our time. Becky, would you know for the record that we do have a quorum? Mr. Green spoke to me today. He's unable to make a Pete. He is our only absentee. First order of business is the review and approval of the minutes of our March 1st meeting. Everybody's had a chance to review those. Members of the commission, do you have a preference or a motion?
Okay, I'll make the motion. I move we accept the minutes as drafted and amended.
Motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Motion, second from Beth. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Let's move on to our request for appropriateness. The first is a request of Megan Gullette at 24 East Sharon for an addition, renovation, expansion for ADA compliance. David, could you promote Ms. Gullette? And we'll take it from there.
Well, he's not moving again.
Keith, are you still on the line?
Yep, I'll take care of it. Good to go.
Hello. You'll probably hear my kids screaming in the background, so I apologize. Dinner time.
It's perfectly all right. Ms. Gullette, we can't see you, but we don't need to. That's
Okay.
totally fine. I think you've been before us before, so you know how we operate. We've all had a
Yeah.
chance to look at your application materials. Very, very well put together, I might add. We'll allow you to speak as much or as little as you like. You should realize, again, we've had a good chance to review all the materials. We'll take it from there.
So basically, in a nutshell, I think that most of the projects that I've put forth are they've all kind of led up to like this moment. So we have a disabled daughter who is 9. She'll be disabled for her whole life. She has a very rare genetic condition that prohibits her from ambulating safely. She can walk, but her disease is progressive. She's one of like 25 kids in the world that has this. So we don't really know what her life will look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So what we want to do is make the addition that was put on our house in the 80s, which is, it's failing. So whether we stay or we go, or this is approved or not, like that's gonna have to be fixed. It's sinking into the ground. And so as she gets bigger, we really do need to make this space safe for her. And so doing this and removing the deck in the back and expanding out like the living space and making that fully ADA compliant with the hallways that a walker or a wheelchair could go through, and then having the fully handicap accessible bathroom would really benefit her life. And then again, whether we stay or go, it will benefit someone else's life, because the main floor, we handicap accessible, will have first floor laundry and then just 3 steps up into the kitchen, which would easily be able to be not ramped, but have like the chair lift at some point if somebody needed that. And then she also has epilepsy. So that's why we wanted to add the 2nd bedroom in the back, so that whether we're downstairs or as she ages to 18 and then she's needing care every day again and she's not in school, it would be a space for like respite or a caregiver or someone to be down there with her and be able to hear and make sure that she's safe like through the night and stuff. So that's kind of the gist of why we're doing the project. Again, you know that I appreciate the feedback and the history of the house itself. So I'm trying to have some options. So I think you saw in the plans, there was an option for a little, kind of like a little portico or something that kind of matches the front architectural porch, which we really love, that we could also have kind of 0 entry into the house, but kind of tie everything together on the external side. And then obviously like you don't care about the inside, but we're going to try to mix the old and new on the inside as well, so that the house flows and keeps the history and character of the home. So that's all I have. You might want to mute me again unless you want to hear the crazies.
No, you're fine. All right, members of the commission, questions?
If I may, before we proceed, Keith, can you promote me to co-host again? I don't know what internet trouble I had, but it's fixed now, I hope.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, members of the commission, questions, comments?
The design seemed pretty well integrated and doesn't significantly change the appearance of the house from the front. And it seems essential. So I would support it.
Any other questions or comments, members of the commission? That,
Am I
was
still on
easier than
mute?
I
Can I
thought.
ask a question?
sure, we can hear you.
Okay, so we recently did the windows on the main house. I would
Mhm.
like to keep the same wood interior, the aluminum clad exterior on the new portion of the house. I know it faces the back, and we'll only be doing one window and then the double door in the front. So it really is only one window. But some of the things, I guess, would I need, if approved, would I need to run it again if the door in the front went from a double to a single? Or like we wanted to have 2 sliding doors in the back instead of a window and a sliding door. Like, I think those are my questions. This is like a, just so everyone knows, you probably already know, because you do this. So this is like a $200,000 probably project. So it's not insignificant in cost. So if I am able to have flexibility in saying like, yes, we've got this approved, but now we're going to do 1 door instead of 2, which is what is already existing, would it need to be run again?
I think the short answer is yes. Whatever
Okay.
we approve, if you make any architectural changes to what is approved, you would have to come back to us.
Okay. Do the windows have to be wood and like the sliding doors and things like that? Would you prefer them to go with what we have in the main house? I know that's, I think, the preference. Right now back here it's vinyl in the addition.
Well, I'll start. I'm not the window expert. There's others on the commission who are more well-versed in on windows and doors for that matter. My position would be that if you match the windows in the house, that would be the most appropriate
Okay.
treatment for them. Anybody else can obviously chime in at any point.
Agree.
All right. Any other questions, comments, members of the commission? David, is there anybody else who wants to speak on this one?
I don't believe we have any attendees who wanted to address this application.
Okay.
If there are, please raise your hands. But no one did reach out to me about this one.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing that we're at the end of our discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Ms. Gullette.
Thank you so much.
If you want to touch base tomorrow with David, he'll set you on the path for building permits and whatever else is needed.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
Thank
great.
you. Have a good
Thank
night.
You too now. All right, let's move on to the second request. That's a request of Daniel M. Wally for a fence at 25 Coral. David, I think we have Mr. M. Wally and at least 2 others that you told me about who are interested in this.
Yeah.
Can you promote them?
I do not see them in the attendees list.
None of them, huh?
None of them.
Well, let's move on then.
Okay.
If you could keep an eye on it, and we'll add them as we can. Let's move on to other business. The first item is continued discussion of driveway setbacks featuring our own Tom Kerr. Tom, I know you did a lot of work, and Beth, for that matter, did a lot of work on this issue. And did I understand, Tom, that you have a PowerPoint, or at least you have 3 handouts that you would like to share? Is that correct?
Correct. I have a few items to share. If I can get the screen. Do I just hit share screen or what?
How's that work, David? Can he share screen or?
Give it a shot.
If you, Keith, if you wanted to promote
the host.
If you could promote Tom Kerr to screen sharing.
Yep, hold on 1 second.
Thank you.
Should be good.
All right. Does anybody see anything, or do I need to click another button.
Once
We
you
don't
hit,
see anything.
once you hit share screen, it'll ask you
Oh.
which screen you want to share.
Let me go back to where I am. Okay, let's see. I'll just do the entire screen, I think. Okay, let's see what happens. So the
Becky?
subject of
There we
the,
go.
are you seeing? Okay, sorry, Becky. So the subject of the setback ordinance, if we're just to refresh your memory, a few years ago, not too many, probably less than 10, I can't recall exactly. We added this part on the paving and parking that the drives be set back from adjoining property at least 5 feet. And at the time, I don't think we really looked into the unintended consequences of how that would impact some of the areas in the village in the A, B, and C districts. So that was where that came up, was that when an application came up on Congress Avenue, we had to deny it because this new ordinance by definition would not allow it, and the applicant did not appeal. So anyway, that was the point of thinking about doing something to help the residents on thin lots. So that's the part of the presentation. So I just wanted to share the parking and paving ordinance review of the 5-foot setback for narrow width lots. And here is the house that happened. The application that came wanting to put a driveway in here to access the backyard for a parking pad, but we denied it, and because we said that didn't have enough for a 5-foot setback. So that setback eliminated his options. So I went and looked into homes around the village, and the one directly to the left, which is on the north side, they have a driveway right there already existing before this ordinance was put in place. And then this example 1. And then in example 2 is the house directly to the right, or on the south side. They also have a driveway on their thin lot before the ordinance was put into place. And then the one to the right of that on the south, they also have a drive, which you can see is a narrow lot, but they do have a drive. So part of the thing we started looking into were what kind of drives might we like to see, or might be an option. And as one of these ribbon driveways, and I sent this document out from up in, I think, Burlington, Vermont. Their historic district requires ribbon driveways, which you can see are 2 strips of pavement with a pervious surface, grass, typically could be gravel, but grass in the middle. And some of the reasons for ribbons, lower costs, curb appeal, water quality, durability, pervious surface, and then they had this schematic drawing. These were all in there, but the key from this one, which I liked, were the 5-foot on center between the strips with a different dimension for the center strip. But that's, anyway, so that's where the discussion about ribbon driveways started coming as a possibility for, on a narrow lot, for people to have a drive access to their backyard, but without, having the 5-foot setback. So anyway, historically, click the wrong button. Driveways historically came about when wagons, before automobiles came along, wagons went back to the backyard, to the barn or whatever, and they caused ruts to be in the grass. So when cars came along, they didn't want to drive in the mud and get stuck, so they started throwing gravel down into the ruts, or sometimes concrete later. And that's how ribbon driveways. So here's another example of a ribbon with grass in the middle with gravel. Here's one with gravel in the middle again. This just happens to be my house, but it's an example of a concrete ribbon driveway. I've lived in this house since '86 and replaced it in kind. This is where the original ribbon driveway was. And just so you know, it's 7 foot 2 inches wide. is this driveway. So it's adequate to get to the back apron. So then we go to the drawing that I sent. Let me go get a bigger view of this. So in districts B and C, we have a 7-foot house setback, which in the case of the application that I showed you earlier, was denied because he couldn't have a 5-foot gap from the property line to the drive and then have an adequate driveway to actually build a driveway. So when I started looking at this, and Beth and I have been going back and forth a few times, commenting and talking, and in the 7-foot district, by definition, they couldn't build bigger than a 7-foot driveway. So that could consist of 2.5 foot wide paver strips with a 2-foot center strip. And that's in district B and C. And then in district A, where you could get an 8-foot, it's a 10-foot setback. You could get a 10-foot driveway width or an 8-foot driveway width in there. In that case, you could have 3-foot pavers still with a 2-foot center strip. And then that would give you a 1-foot setback off the property line of the house, which we just centered it. And I'll speak about that in a moment, the centering concept of a driveway. And then in the districts AA1 and AA2, where you have a 15-foot house setback, by definition, you could get your 5-foot. We could leave that alone in the ordinance. You have enough space to get the driveway set 5 foot off. So I'm not proposing changing that. And we can discuss whether or not we want any future driveways to be required to be ribbon driveways or not. But in the verbiage I'm going to show, I added the word centered on the available space. And the reason I did that was, for example, in the district B and C, if you had a 7-foot setback, but the house was actually built 8 feet off the property line or even 9 feet off the property line, including the word the centered concept, then the driveway, 7-foot driveway, would be centered and give you a little bit of setback on the property line and on the house. And since we don't know if houses are specifically made 7 feet off the property line or 8 feet or 9 feet, this way we wouldn't have to think about it every time one comes along. By definition, they would center it on the available space. The same goes for this 10-foot setback. If the house was actually 12 feet or 13 feet, if they centered it on the available space, then again, by definition, we wouldn't have to revisit or get into try to write the ordinance to cover every possible placement of the home relative to the property line. So that's what that was about. Let's go back to there. So the ordinance, the existing ordinance, as I showed before, setback from adjoining property line at least 5 feet, as we said. So a potential addition would be to add this verbiage, which I hope you've had a chance to read, except in districts A, B, and C, where setback of 5 feet from adjoining property lines would not accommodate a usable driveway, then in such case, an 8-foot maximum width, 7-foot minimum width ribbon driveway may be constructed centered on the available space between house and adjoining property line. And again, that center is key for placement, so that if somebody didn't want to, the whole point was we didn't want to put it on the property line if we can avoid it. We want some kind of buffer between the property line that we can get. So that's where that language came from. And then we would also need to put in the definition section what a ribbon driveway is. And it merely states what we've already gone over: 2 impervious surfaces separated by 1 pervious surface. And we didn't put grass in there because even though grass would be ideal and normal, pervious could be gravel. And then on the 7-foot drive, the dimensions are given, and an 8-foot wide drive, the dimensions are given. And that's the end of the presentation. So that's the work we did, and the concept for language. And probably, I don't know if anybody had any comments to bring up tonight, or if you want to mull it over until next time. Or
I have 2 questions. This is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
When you say it should be centered. Does that mean, can they still run the concrete to the house, or do they have to leave that grass or some impervious surface on the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. For example, in this one here, for example, that's a good question, because in this example here, in the B example, what if they wanted an 8-foot drive but flush up against the house?
Right.
Yeah, and get a bigger setback over on the right. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Or if they wanted to leave it like it is, but make the ribbon on the left-hand side wider, so that I'm thinking some people may not want a little strip of grass right up against their house. They might prefer to have it just concrete up to it.
Okay. Good. If you don't mind, I'll take notes of this and then try to come up with some language that would allow for that. Because again, every time you create an ordinance, you try to make it as or specific as possible, yet flexible enough to where for such things as you're coming up with. Because I guarantee you, no matter what language you come up with, like the unintended consequences of the original one we did a few years ago, you don't know what's going to happen. All right, so
I had another question. What about a non-conforming lots where they have a very narrow lot line? In other words, the house is closer than would be permitted under our existing regulations. Is that covered at all, or excluded in your proposed ordinance?
no, we didn't touch on that. So non-compliant lots, non-conforming lots. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Bob, I was going to, sorry, I was going to chime in and say that when you come to the finalizing of the language, you and I can work on that with our solicitor to make sure that whatever's presented will cover every possible scenario as much as possible for something like this.
So Tom, this is Dan Mason. I had a question for you. On the last page of the actual written ordinance, could you pull that up again?
This one?
Yes, sir. The last page of that then?
The proposed one, or this one?
The proposed. Okay. Specifically looking, I guess it could have been the page before that then. The one where it said that the surface would be impervious. But then you made a comment that if they wanted it to be pervious, it could be the ribbon piece. But the way it was written, I think it was only written impervious. You're breaking up, sorry.
Street block, for example, very good.
It's really choppy. Really not getting what you're saying. Sorry. Just a bad connection. That was my only comment is if you were intending that it would be pervious and impervious, that would just capture that in there, because some people may not want any kind of gravel. Or
they showed that here, for example, pervious. Going into the driveway.
Yeah.
Are you still?
I'm here. I'm following.
Anybody there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it's written the way you wanted it written.
Yeah.
I guess there's a question about whether it could all be pervious if you had a ribbon driveway that was gravel.
Right.
Because we do have precedent for that.
Maybe Tom should leave and come back. I can't hear him at all.
Yeah, I think that would be best, Tom, if you wanted to leave and come back.
Hey, David, let me make this suggestion. Maybe he's eating up all his bandwidth by sharing his documents. And
Yeah.
David, if you could share them, you have his copies, don't you? Other than maybe his PowerPoint, you have the documents. So David, if you could share them, Tom, you could stop sharing. Tom, did you hear me?
Am I back?
Yes. Did you hear what I suggested? Tom Kerr?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I got it.
I'm going to try to call him on his cell to see if that's going to help. David, is that you sharing the screen there?
It is.
Okay.
Hello, my computer's gone nuts. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, all right, yeah.
So maybe if he wasn't co-host anymore, it'd
All
help.
right.
Yeah, Keith, if you could take Tom Kerr off as a co-host, that might help too. Tom, can you hear us?
Cancel.
Tom Kerr?
He's been.
Bear with me. I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing.
I've stopped you. You're good.
We heard you that time. Tom, if you wanted to continue talking, we heard you in your last bit of speech there.
So since Tom's not talking, I'll just say that I think he'll understand that the gravel is a good option and that it should be in there, that it could all be pervious as long as it was not just dirt, but gravel or some other
Variables.
product. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tom, it looks like you're back on. Hopefully we can hear you. Let me just ask if there are any other questions or comments from members of the commission.
Well, yes. Should there be a minimum setback, or will we allow driveways to be built on the property line?
You know, as written, it could go to the property line under Tom's example. And in a tight spot, you know, for the situations where this is written for, I don't know that that's inappropriate. I was trying to think, as we're talking, why we put the 5 feet in the first place. My recollection was there was a property owner who had some trees along the property line. There was concern about new driveways being cut that might cut the roots. And that's okay, perhaps in larger lots, but smaller lots, if you only have 7 feet to play with, you know, a driveway going up to the property line may not be inappropriate.
I think we should require a survey in these situations. I know I owned a property in Glendale where the neighbor put in a driveway and encroached on my property, and we ignored it. We just let it be. But their driveway actually is onto my property by about a foot. It's over on Willow. And so it might be something, if we're going to be that close, we may want to require a survey so people don't construct onto their neighbor's property.
If a proposed driveway would construct under this proposal here, then part of the zoning review would require a survey to proceed to Planning Commission for review.
That's good.
And I heard the comment, I was muted before, about in the 7-foot setback district, by definition, it'll have to be on the property line because less than 7-foot driveway is useless. But on the 10-foot setback, you know, that's why I said centered on the available space, or and one of the comments up against the house to get a little bit of buffer on the, is what we're going for.
Right, so is a 7-foot driveway that has a 0 setback okay?
In district, was it B and C, where the 7-foot setback is a possibility? It would have, yes. Because that's all the land you have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing, I didn't put it in there because it's already in the other section for garages. Garages are required to be set off the property line 5 feet, so that once you got your drive, your access drive past the house and going to a garage, for example, you would have to curve it to get that 5-foot set into the driveway. You would have to shape it so that it would curve and then be 5 foot off the property line to get into the garage. So I didn't want to bog this down with that because the ordinance exists elsewhere for the garage setbacks, accessory building setbacks.
Okay, so you're saying the accessory building has to be 5 foot back, but couldn't you continue that drive, that solid pavement on the property line so that you have some way to jockey and turn around and that type of thing? Or no?
Well, the apron, I would think the apron would be in front of the garage, which would be 5 feet off the property line.
So is there going to be something in the ordinance telling people that they have to then shift it? And how do they shift over? It has to go gradually. They can't just do a right angle.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's another fine point of connecting to, maybe specifying that it has to connect to an apron, which, you know, is 5 feet off the property line, like the accessory building. That's something to consider. I'll make a note of that.
And do we call out anything for, I'm not sure if this is getting too far into the means and methods, the slope of those aprons towards the pervious in the center, so that whomever is building that doesn't slope it towards the neighbor's site and everything? I know it's very minimal. I'm just asking, because if they do a solid piece and they don't slope it right, do we just assume that the contractors are going to follow that, or is there anything that catches that?
It's a good question.
So if they're installing the, excuse me, the apron, that would be something that would be inspected by our Public Works Department when that apron is installed, and would be inspected as part of the building permit process for the installation of the driveway.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's good feedback.
Yeah, and Tom, I don't know if you were online when I raised the idea that a 7-foot driveway or 8-foot driveway could be 100% pervious if it were gravel, like the historic precedents you showed.
Right. Yeah, well, I think, did Dan bring up the option of the strips being pervious as well, which obviously would allow for that, Beth? So could we catch it in that area?
Yeah, so it just mean including that in the ordinance.
Okay, okay.
Forgot to put that in.
Right. Okay.
Right.
I'm glad we all read this. Anything else?
Well,
Go ahead, Beth.
Well, just another thought that if you have no setback at all on the side, and you get out of your car, you open the door and get out, it means that you'll be stepping onto your neighbor's property.
Right.
So
That's,
I'm not
yeah.
sure about that.
Well, in these worst case scenarios, I'm thinking about these, like in the 7-foot setback zone or district. These are really access to the rear yard. They're not really designed to park, because if there's a fence and there's a house, you literally can't open the doors of a car to get out. So you would have to get back to the apron in the back before you exit the vehicle. So I don't know. Is there some language or something you're thinking about we need to address?
Well, I'm a little concerned. What if the neighbor wants to put in shrubbery or flowers or something along their property line, and then you have people trudging all over it when they're getting in and out of cars, and putting salt on their driveway, and it's going off onto their landscaping. Plus, what if somebody already has a large tree there right on the property line, and you're coming in and cutting through all these roots to put in this driveway? Isn't that a problem?
Well, I think with your property rights, your rights are to cut as deep as you want in the earth.
Not if you damage the tree or kill the tree.
I think we might want to research that with the legal group.
Well, yeah, I could, but I've read up on it before, and you're allowed to cut limbs off of your neighbor's tree up to the property line, but there is a clause in there about harm to the tree also.
I can't answer that.
I can't either, so much. I can't answer that either. I've never looked into it, Bob, but it's always a concern when we got neighbors close to each other. Let's move on. I mean, we're only leaving ourselves about 45 minutes for the 2 more applications, assuming the in-laws join us.
Let me suggest that when the time comes, excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me suggest that when you start working on the language here, that we raise the question with our solicitor. I don't want a law review article on the subject, but hopefully she will know the answer or be able to find it quickly. We do not address, to my knowledge, the preservation of trees one way or the other in our zoning ordinances. That it's more a matter of pure property law.
That's correct, Mayor.
So the fact is, I suppose, that somebody could theoretically build a driveway that is totally in compliance with our zoning ordinances and still does not comply with property law to the extent that it protects trees. I just don't know. I've seen the same case law about cutting branches above that hang over your property. I've never seen anything about cutting roots that go beneath. And so that would be something to look into and be aware of, but also be aware that it's not something we'll really want to address in our zoning ordinance.
Agreed. I think the best thing, Dan brought up the point of angling the strips so that they drain into the center would help that issue. Is the salt runoff or anything like that, Bob? If it drained back into your own ribbon, you wouldn't have to worry. We wouldn't have to impose on the neighbor that way.
That's true in that case, but if you're going to do concrete, how deep does it have to be to have the bed of gravel and then the concrete on it? My guess is you'd be probably 8 inches of gravel and 4 inches of concrete. So
that's about standard.
Cutting substantially through roots and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe we need something in there that says in the case where it would infringe on the neighbor's landscaping, that that the neighbors' rights would will out over the driveway.
I think this goes back to the review of the existing law. Let's find that out first, because this may be a moot point if the law is already out there.
True.
Well, excellent
Thanks.
work, Tom and Beth. I appreciate all this effort. And I want a procedural question, if I might. When you're having that discussion with our solicitor, if you would just clarify with her what process, what path this would take on becoming formally before us as a review. I'm sure there's going to be a public hearing by the Planning Commission with an ultimate recommendation to the Village Council, but just ask her what the best process is for that.
Okay. And for historic perspective, I think if we went back and saw how this got implemented the first time, that might be a guide for us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It should be based on the same law, so it should be very similar, if not the same. David?
I was going to say, Tom, you and I can set up a time to discuss this a little bit further out of the meeting and set up an opportunity to discuss it with the solicitor and go through and make sure that legally bases are covered before this returns in, what would that be, May?
Yes.
And we can finalize some language for presentation.
And when you said Tom, you meant Tom Kerr or Tom Brightenstein?
I did mean Tom Kerr. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was my
I'm sorry, Mr. Brighton.
Good. Yeah, I'm busy that day, so I'm glad it's Tom Kerr. All right, well, let's move on. David, did anybody from the Imwally fence populate our participant?
See here. I don't remember seeing anyone when I last checked.
Okay.
I do not see anyone from the Imwally application.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our request for a conditional use permit from Denny Dellinger, 42 Washington. It's a request to allow a nursing or convalescent home in the B residential district. If you wouldn't mind, David, promoting Mr. Dellinger. While he's being promoted, I will remind the commission that this is a conditional use, and which means we are a recommending body instead of an absolute deciding body. Ultimately, the decision would be made by the village council. It is what's called a quasi-judicial type of application, one in which we're kind of sitting as judge and jury. And in that respect, we'll ask each of the people who are willing to testify or provide other evidence that they be sworn in. I would also point out too that we do have a hard stop at 7 o'clock because this bandwidth is being taken by council for their meeting. We will be cognizant of that. And David, if you would help us watch the time. As I read the ordinance, we only have 30 days to make a recommendation once it comes before us. Because we're not meeting again until beginning of May, this is actually our April meeting. We're not meeting until May. That's going to be beyond the 30 days. So let's not lose sight of the fact that we'll need to ask for permission from the applicant to waive that 30 days and continue in May. All right. Mr. Dellinger, is he promoted?
You should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can't see you, but we can see your slides. Well, we don't need to see.
Right.
That's fine.
Are you also able to promote, please, my partners, Janet Davies and Mark Hutton?
I see Mr. Hutton, and he's able to talk. I don't see Miss Davies.
They're probably together. So that
all
would
right.
be good.
Now I have the PowerPoint up here on the screen. So as you present, let me know, and I'll be glad to go to the next slide.
Okay.
And before you do, Mr. Dellinger, let's get you and your partner sworn in.
Okay.
The mayor is offered to administer the oath.
Okay, I will do that with this understanding. Because this is a matter that will come before council, I will not participate in a substantive way in this hearing. However, I will participate in a procedural way, which is swearing in witnesses who testify before the commission. And Mr. Dellinger, I would like to know if you have any objection to my fulfilling that limited role at this time.
You couldn't hear that, could you? No objections, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I didn't, did Mr. Dellinger say no objection? I did not hear him.
Yeah, he said no objections, Don.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger, then I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I so swear.
Okay, you are sworn. I will swear in any other witnesses that have to come before us also.
You've got Mark Hutton and Janet Davies here.
Okay, well, I can swear you both in now, but let's do it together. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
We do.
You are sworn.
All right, Mr. Dellinger and others, would you please proceed with your application?
Yeah, and I'll go through this very quickly. We're here to request approval of a conditional use permit for a residential assisted living home at 42 Washington Avenue. Next slide, please, David. Very briefly, I'm Denny Dellinger, the property owner. I'm an architect and developer in this case. And Janet and Mark can briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Janet Davies. I'm a speech language pathologist and the co-owner and co-founder of administrator of Mimi's House, which is a residential assisted living and memory care home in Loveland.
Great. Next
And I'm
slide.
Mark Hutton.
Oh, sorry, Mark.
I'm Mark Hutton. I'm Janet's husband and mechanical engineer by training and co-founder with Janet and the business manager for Mimi's House residential assisted living in Loveland. Next slide.
I'm going to briefly talk about the current situation and a little bit of history of my involvement with the property. And then Mark's going to primarily talk about current market needs, preservation, conservation plans. We'll flip back and forth. Benefits to Glendale will be discussed, and the vision and our team. So next slide, please. I think you're all very familiar with the property and know that it was part of it was originally a house built in the 1860s and additions put on in the early part of the 20th century to be a segregated African-American elementary school until about 1955, when schools were desegregated. And the building was used as incidental storage space for Princeton School District until I don't know when, but it was turned back over to Glendale in 2009. So essentially, this building has had no real use for almost 70 years. Please, next slide, please. This is an aerial photograph of the surrounding site, basically a residential area. My initial plans were to try to develop it as a community arts center modeled after the Art Barn in Marymount, but basically that didn't work out. Never was able to get enough enthusiasm to support it, especially with the COVID crisis. And then I thought about another development concept of a residential use in the building that would have required a zone change that I didn't expect any support for. So next slide, please. So I decided to put it on the market, and after about 3 months, I double checked with my realtor this morning, and he said there's been about 55 or 60 showings of the property and no written offers. And so, you know, I was getting pretty discouraged. I really, you know, take responsibility for these projects. When I try and take them on, I really want to make something work here. So a more careful review of the zoning code and showed me that another conditional use was possible that I hadn't considered, and that was a nursing or convalescent home. I had met Mark and Janet a couple of years or so ago at a real estate organization we're involved with, and knew that they were, and they had developed a similar residential assisted living home in Loveland. So I called them, they said they were interested, and next slide, please. So we've been trying to evaluate this building and how we could make it work for this new use. Basically, the building is in really poor condition. The stucco was put over the wood siding of the house originally. And next slide, please. You can see many, you know, deteriorated portions of the building. There are parts of the building that on the inside, the excuse me, the paneling and plaster has been removed to expose non-existent wood studs that are just powder on the ground and the back of the stucco sheathing holding the building up at that point. So next slide, please. It really is a blighted building at this point and in very poor condition. Next slide, please. The basement has crumbling foundation walls, and the boiler room is a slightly lower elevation. It's usually about 18 inches deep in water because that's apparently where the water table is. Next slide, please. And this is the gymnasium portion of the building after I removed the mezzanine structure that was in there so that you could get a real feeling for the full volume of the space. And it's worth preserving in our minds. So next slide, please. These are the plans of the existing buildings, and you can see in the upper left the roof plan very distinctly where the original house was in the middle of the construction, and then the additions on either side. The first floor plan, by the way, where it says first floor plan, existing plan, or first floor existing plan, is just below our driveway, which I want to incorporate a ribbon driveway. I think those are just really spectacular. And then the main uses on the building were the gymnasium in the front and the classrooms on the first floor. I don't know when the upper floor was last used, and the basement was used for boiler room and food prep area and a couple of bathrooms down there. Next slide, please. These are front elevation and the existing west side elevation showing the existing conditions. Next slide, please. This is where Mark takes over.
Yep. So wanted to speak to, first of all, thank you for having us on and allowing us to address you guys. I wanted to speak a little bit about how we got involved in assisted living and speak to the real need in the market. You guys have had these slides ahead of time, so there's no need for me to read them for you. I just wanted to point out on this particular slide, statistics show 4,000 seniors are turning 85 or older every day. The average age of a senior living in assisted living is 84. So basically there's 1.5 million new 85-plus-year-old elderly persons in the US every year. And it's growing pretty dramatically. Next slide, please. This shows you graphically what that looks like. And you can see the red band there is the 85-plus population. This is, of course, as the result of the baby boomers. And you can see there in 2010, it's fairly wide, and it expands pretty dramatically into 2040 and 2050, where it triples and quadruples in size. Next slide, please. So this is talking about the same growth pattern. This is just a percentage of growth chart. The interesting thing here on this slide is that there's a looming problem that we're not seeing yet, but we will, and what this research paper calls a care gap. And that's where an elder person today generally has an average of 7 immediate family members that are potentially available to care for them. And because of the changing demographics, by the year 2030, there's only going to be 4 family members available to care for the elder people, because the elder people are expanding in numbers faster than their families are. So that's, again, another gap that is requiring literally exponential need for assisted living for elder people. Next slide. So in the need, and we're all familiar with large nursing homes and large assisted living homes. Ideally, if you're an elder person, you really want to stay in your house. I certainly want to stay in my home when I reach that age. And I'm certain that all of you do as well. And that's certainly ideal if you can do so. But there are situations where you can't. When that does happen, it's been shown that that person is going to prefer a residential home or a home-like situation 10-to-1 compared to a larger institutional type facility that we nickname big box for assisted living. And really, this is a fairly new type of plan here in the Midwest. It's huge out west and down south. And in fact, this is where we learned about it. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Janet, the ratio.
Yeah, so the residential assisted living model enables seniors to live in a more residential area, more like a neighborhood. And the key to the model is having a higher caregiver to resident ratio, and which is what we've done at Mimi's house. We have a caregiver to resident ratio of 1 caregiver to 4 residents, which is far, far superior to anything else in Cincinnati, actually. And the average ratio in any large facility is 15-to-1, 1 to 15, excuse me. So 1 caregiver per every 15 residents. We have a number of caregivers that have worked in facilities where they've had 1 caregiver to 25 residents. So this model provides a much superior care ratio and quality of life. Next slide, please.
Yeah, that leads us really into the solution. And as I mentioned to you, when we learned about this, we were really, really excited, quite frankly. We've been in the real estate space for a few years now. Again, though relatively new in the Midwest, we did our training on this asset class out in Phoenix, where I just heard yesterday they've surpassed 2,000 residential assisted living homes just in Phoenix and in the Phoenix area. So, this is a coming boom, if you will. And really, we love that because the care ratio is so far superior. And in Cincinnati right now, there's less than 10, of which Mimi's house is one of those. And but we see more and more coming to this model. Next slide, please. Back to Denny.
Thanks, Mark. Of course, we respect the historical significance of the building in the community, and we certainly intend to preserve all monuments and plaques, and to preserve the existing gymnasium building. Next slide, please. So the dotted lines represent the portions of the building that we propose to demolish, essentially the house and the classroom additions, and to remove the foundation walls as necessary to fill in the basement, so that we can have a space or an addition that's all on the same floor level as the existing gymnasium. Next slide, please. So as I said, we intend to preserve this portion of the building and update it, enhance it as we can, thermally insulate better and more thermally efficient windows. A couple of additions that we'll discuss later with the next plan, please. So this is a proposed site plan. You can see the gymnasium in the upper right corner. That's about a little over 2,500 square feet. And then the addition to the left we propose is about almost 8,200 square feet. And then the parking is the rear, accessed by the driveway in the existing location, and a new fence that would surround the property, and a gate that would secure it at the driveway. As we said, these folks, we want them to be able to go outside and be out in the sunshine and whatever, but we need to make sure that they don't wander off. And next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations, keeping the front gymnasium building and then adding on with what we feel is a fairly subdued addition that's in keeping with the existing building, and certainly thought it was a backdrop to the existing building. Next slide, please. Very briefly, again, here's the rear and the north or the east side elevation. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the floor plan showing in the upper right corner the existing gymnasium building. We intend that to maintain the existing volume height with the kitchen in the upper left corner of that, and then the rest basically open living dining space for the residents, and a couple of restrooms up here that would be handicap accessible. And also we want to add a terrace across the front that would be an outdoor space at the same floor level that residents could sit outside in nice weather. And then to the left, we have the addition. We're proposing 16 private individual rooms with private baths. And then the area in the middle is a big higher ceiling central gathering area with skylights to let in daylight, and a couple of garden type areas that will let in daylight from the sides in the middle. And Mark, do you want to say anything more about this at this point?
Yeah, when we got together with Denny, one of the things that we were you worked with him on was to make sure these will be these residents' bedrooms. So we wanted to make them nice and roomy like they would have in their own home. So it may be difficult to see at this scale, but each one of these rooms has room for their bed, their dresser, their nightstand, also a nice big fluffy recliner. I know at Mimi's house, we encourage them to bring their own furniture if they want, to make the space their own as best they can. And the fact that they'll have their own restroom with shower so they can have privacy. And those that are able can certainly do so on their own. And those who are not, certainly the caregivers will be there to take care of them. And so, this is basically going to be kind of like a large house with a lot of bedrooms and a great big living room, and then a great room connected with the kitchen. So we see this as still going to be a real nice homey feel for the house. Next slide.
We see many benefits to the village of Glendale. I think the number one benefit is replacing a blighted building with an active and attractive property that preserves the historical character of the original structure. And then, of course, property taxes will be levied on this building. We expect to spend at least $1.6 million, and that will no doubt come to the auditor's attention before long. So, Mark, you have more to say about it?
Yeah. Well said, Denny. On the employment side, one of the other benefits to Glendale is going to be employment. At Mimi's house, we have, as Janet mentioned, our caregiver ratio being 4-to-1. So we have 2 caregivers on days and 1 on nights with our 8 residents at Mimi's house. This home will have 4 caregivers on days and 2 on nights, when most of the residents are sleeping. We're expecting that that's going to be a total of 24 employees that will be bringing those jobs to Glendale as well.
And another benefit we feel is that we'll be bringing superior care for people that need assistance with activities of daily living and memory care to the citizens of Glendale.
And right into Glendale, and they don't have to go elsewhere to get it.
It can be very close to their current home.
Next slide.
Our vision for Mimi's house is really based on the fundamental belief that, from what I saw in my career, working with geriatric patients, that we just aren't doing enough for our seniors. And this is a really outstanding way that we can do more as a society, to do more for our loved ones. And that's the vision that we have for this property here at Glendale, Washington Street, to be in Glendale to be, provide that same kind of loving care for seniors in a very home-like situation.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Excuse me.
Just very briefly, again, I'm Denny Dellinger, the property owner. I'm an architect and I live in Over the Rhine, and my passion is restoring historic buildings to appropriate new uses. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to partner with Mark and Janet to hopefully make this happen in Glendale. Next slide, please.
And as we've said, I'm Janet Davies, and with 30 plus years experience as a speech pathologist working with geriatric clients, the last 10 years in skilled nursing facilities, working with people with primarily with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And so I really know what the care level of care is the standard here in Cincinnati, but in most cities. And my own mother had dementia as well. And when we were looking for a place for her, it was just became so obvious to me that there just wasn't many places where you could feel like you were, caring for your mom and in a home where she was getting the amount of attention that she really needed. So I think this is a real viable option for us to do something better for society. Next slide, please.
And already introduced myself, Mark, as an engineer. I spent most of my career, 25 plus years as an engineer, mostly in automotive, aerospace, aviation fields. So I come at this a little bit different angle. I'm really more the numbers guy, I guess. But my parents are in their 80s. And, I know that obviously really concerned about their future, what they're going to be. Knock on wood, they're still living at home by themselves, but, you don't know when that time is going to come when they're going to have to, move on and need additional care. So when Jana and I found this business model and the way we could contribute to the community and have a viable business at the same time, we just fell in love with it, and we've been, I'd say, eyeball deep since then. Next slide, please. One of the things that, as an engineer, we're not real known to be emotional type folks. So one of the things that was not planned as a benefit of this was the families. We knew that we'd be giving great care to the elderly residents of the home, but the benefits to the family have just been amazing. We've just been open 18 months. We opened in September of 2019. And these quotes come from actual family members of our residents, and the amount of love and adoration they give to our caregivers and to us and what we're doing for their loved ones, their family members, is really just amazing. It just blows me away. And so, yeah, not that everything's always rosy, but this kind of stuff, drives you through. And we really know we have, solid evidence right here that we're doing a great thing. And that's why we love it. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit more background on us. As I said, we've been in real estate for a little while, and we've done everything from rehabbing houses to learning how to buy apartment buildings, which we've done, and we've been really involved in the local RIA club. Once we found out about the assisted living, the residential assisted living model through our real estate, we dove in head first, and we went on a boot camp out in Phoenix. We became residential assisted living specialists. We were also one of the founding members of the RAL National Association of homes like ours all around the country. And so we've really, like I say, we've dug in deep. We've been helping other people kind of casually, and the RAL Academy, which is run out in Phoenix, they reached out to us, and we've been recently selected to be part of their support team for other people like us who want to bring this kind of facility to their hometown. for their elder population. And next slide. Again, I hope that you guys have had the opportunity to take a look at this. This presentation was getting big. I didn't want to load it up with too many pictures and videos and things. I wouldn't have been able to send it. So the two links there are the YouTube is videos of our home, just kind of panning through, looking at the rooms and the home itself, and how we took a 5-bedroom home and turned it into an 8-bedroom home there in Loveland. And then the other one is just some supporting pictures of the interior of the home, some of those including our residents and our caregivers. And again, just some supporting information for those of you who are not familiar with the residential concept.
There's some more interior pictures of the Eckstein School as it is currently as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, next slide.
That is the last slide.
I think that's it.
I think we're it. So again, thank you very much for letting us present to the group, and we're all ears for your questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dellinger and team. David, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just we have about 15 minutes remaining.
Well, that was my next point. We are bumping up to our hard stop at 7 o'clock. As I suspected, I think we're going to have to go to our May meeting. For that point, while I've got your attention, Mr. Dellinger and team, would you be willing to waive the 30-day timeline by which we have to act?
Yes.
Sure. We'd prefer not to and just get an approval tonight, but we understand that might be overly optimistic.
Yeah, well, realistically, that's correct. We have 4 or 5 people in line who, your neighbors, I think, who want to speak.
Oh, excellent. I'd love to hear from
them. And also we ourselves will have some questions and comments.
Sure.
In anticipation of a motion to defer, let me make 2 comments. And that is, what I like to hear from an applicant is how your application conforms to the requirements from our code. And in particular, in section 154.62B, it talks about 3 main criteria that we use to review conditional uses: effect on the neighborhood, conformance with the comprehensive plan, and effect on traffic. I didn't hear any of that today. So this extra time will give you time to address those criteria.
To speak to that, please.
Well, let's hold off on that, because I want at least,
okay.
I want you to be more prepared than just doing it off the cuff. Those are, it's my way of thinking, those are the most important things. So,
and I have thought about those, so it's not exactly off the cuff.
Well, in any event, time's running short, and I don't want you to be constrained by the time. I want you to give a more complete presentation on those issues. And related to that, obviously a big part of this application involves demolition of a significant part of the structure. I didn't realize that there was a house from the 1860s that is part of this project. There's some very particular criteria for demolition, our review of demolition in our zoning code. And in particular, it's at section 154.46G. And if you could also beef up your presentation to address those criteria as well at our next meeting, I'd appreciate that. Right. Okay, David, let's dive into the people who are online. Hopefully they've heard us, haven't they? They've heard the presentation. They've just heard what I've said.
They have.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question first? Just a clarification that we have 2 different things going on here. We have a conditional use, and then we have a design, a certificate of appropriateness for design. And so tonight, are we dealing with just conditional use, and will we deal with design later? Or you mentioned demolition.
Yeah.
How do these 2 things relate? Well,
you're probably correct in the sense that our true focus is the conditional use, the 3 criteria that I just listed off. But because it is a significant demolition, I didn't want to lose track of the appropriateness part of our review for demolition. So I think realistically, if this does pass the conditional use through the council, they would have to come back to us with an appropriateness review. And there's where we would focus on demolition. But because demolition is such an important part of this project, I think it's behooves everybody to address it up front. David, would you promote
Yes.
whoever's first on the list?
Let me remind myself of the list. It looks like Mr. Bill Parrish. I'm going to promote him to allow to talk.
Okay.
Is there a time limit that you would like to set on these comments, seeing as we have 9 minutes remaining in the meeting?
Well, yeah, 8 minutes. Let's Mr. Parrish, are you online?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Let me just, you've heard what I've been saying, and you've already heard the applicant speak. We're running into a hard stop at 7 o'clock. So I thought we would begin the public participation part of this hearing. And you're the first one on the list. We'll cut you off when we have about 2 minutes to go, 2 minutes before 7. And I don't mean to suggest that that's going to be the last we'll hear from you, because there'll be new information from the applicant at our May meeting. And we'll certainly allow you to address that as well in our May meeting. So if you want to take a few minutes, 5 or 6 minutes now, and then we'll have to cut you off.
Yeah, I won't take that long. I would propose that we have another meeting for the villagers, those who this will impact. I think that's important, this process, that we hear more than just this. My biggest point, and I would like for others to be able to have time to talk, because I'll be involved in this entire process. The historic significance, and I think that's where my focus will be. I think there hasn't been enough said about the Verdon House and how its role in the Eckstein School and this structure. I think that may have caught a number of people by surprise, but it's never caught me by surprise. I think when ECAC was actually in the process of obtaining the building, we went to the EPA and were going to get a grant to actually go through the building. We had an EPA expert go through, but the state was going to give us money to actually do the work to preserve that part of the building, because it is the significance of this. So I think that there's a lot we can talk about, but I think it's this whole issue of preservation and the village of Glendale being coined as a historic village. How do we preserve these historic structures? And that's where I live these days with all the research in that I've been doing on some of these structures. I'm learning that we have to figure out first how we're going to preserve these structures and the history that is associated with it, personally for the African-American community. Now, I heard nothing about how this relates to the African-American community, and I heard nothing about money and time frame. It's been over 2.5 years that we've been in this process with nothing being done. So I think, how do we address the same rules that were levied against the Eckstein Cultural Arts Center, that those same rules be applied? Because I think the emphasis were put on money and time frame and who is paying the money and how long is it going to take to get this done. And so, but I would like to complete my thoughts with just the historic significance. We've torn down a few African-American structures in this community. And I think that's shameful for us to be a historic village in doing that. But I also would say, I think we need to have another meeting, call for another meeting that is separate for those in the village who would like to speak on behalf of this. We haven't talked about ambulances. We haven't talked about any of those things that will impact such a building. So again, I'd like to just ask that we consider having a meeting between that time for us in the village to address it, concerns that we have, and also address money and time frame, which is what we really need to address to know upfront where these resources are coming from, especially after 2.5 years of the property being in the hands of Denny and nothing being done.
Bill, thank you for that. Your first, and I think your main comment is meeting with the neighbors, and that actually goes hand in hand with what I mentioned just before you were promoted to speak. That a private meeting between the applicant and the neighbors would be an ideal setting for you all to figure out what the effect on the neighborhood is. And again, that's straight from one of the criteria in our zoning resolution. But I can't force you all to meet. I would urge that you and the applicant and the developer at least reach out to each other and see if that's a possibility to come to some meeting of the minds. I don't know if you've done it. Again, I can't require that of you, but that certainly would go a long way in addressing that criteria from the code. As far as money, that's not a concern of this commission. This is a private developer, I assume with private funds. And that's really as much as we need to know. It looks like
needs to know. I think the public needs to know, especially in light of what the Eckstein Cultural Arts Center, the 4.5, 5 years process that we went through of trying to establish things that had to do with resources and that. I think it's important for us to know, especially in light of that, because the public doesn't know a lot of what we presented as a foundation for the renovations of this property.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in this case, we need to be completely transparent since we're trying to do this correctly, since we didn't do it correctly in the process that an ECAC went through. So I would say, yes, we do need to be completely transparent and know where the money is coming from, and definitely know what the time frame is for this being done, because that's what we were required to present.
Well, Bill, again, that's your presentation on funding was probably before the council. It wasn't. Funding is never a consideration of the planning commission. We assume that the funding is there for public or private enterprises. So if you want to hash that out in a private discussion with the applicant, I'll leave that to you all. But if you want to bring it up to council, again, this is a private.
We have about a minute. Just
well, I don't want to hash that out. I just wanted to make note of that as something that became public as it relates to ECAC and the reasons why it was denied this property. So, and I think that we really do have to have some conversation around this. And that's from a historic standpoint. This isn't
15 seconds, meeting's over.
This isn't personal to me. I think it is, though, the historical aspect of this is really huge. We need to address it.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. We all appreciate that, Bill. And again, let's work on that between now and May the 3rd. Wally gave us a timeline. Is there a motion? I hate to cut it off so short, but we do only have a limited bandwidth. Is there a motion to defer?
I think I have to move to adjourn.
Motion to continue us to the May meeting by way of adjournment.
Second.
Is that correct, Don?
Yes, that is correct.
Defer and adjourn. Motion second by Beth. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Sorry for the short leash, but we'll do it again May 3rd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.